Tonight, we're going to follow exactly what happens inside your body during those hours you never see, from the moment you lose consciousness to the moment you return. And what you'll discover might change the way you think about sleep forever. The clock reads 10 p.m. You slip beneath the blankets. The lights go out. And for the first time today, your body receives a simple but powerful message. The day is ending. It isn't your eyes closing that starts the process. It begins with darkness. For hours, light has been entering your eyes, quietly telling your brain that it's still daytime. Now, as the room grows dim, those signals begin to fade. Deep within your brain, a tiny structure called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the body's internal clock, recognizes the change. It has been keeping time all day, tracking the rising and setting of light with remarkable precision. Now, it begins preparing your body for the night ahead. A small gland near the center of your brain starts releasing melatonin. Often called the sleep hormone, melatonin doesn't actually make you fall asleep. Instead, it gently tells every system in your body that night has arrived. Your core body temperature begins to fall, only by about 1 degree Celsius, a change so small you'll probably never notice it. Yet that tiny drop makes an enormous difference. Your muscles begin to relax, your metabolism slows, your brain becomes less alert. Blood vessels near the surface of your skin widen slightly, allowing excess heat to escape into the surrounding air. It's one reason a cool side of the pillow feels so comforting. Your heartbeat is still steady, but no longer driven by the constant demands of the day. Stress hormones that helped you stay focused begin to decline. Your breathing becomes slower, more regular, more effortless. If someone were watching you now, they might think nothing much was happening. You simply appear to be resting. But beneath that peaceful stillness, millions of tiny adjustments are already unfolding. Your liver is changing how it manages energy. Your digestive system is finishing the day's work. Your kidneys continue filtering your blood, quietly maintaining the delicate balance of water and minerals that every cell depends on. Even your eyes, hidden behind closed eyelids, are beginning to move more slowly. Your brain is also changing. The fast electrical activity that filled your waking hours begins giving way to slower, more synchronized patterns. Like a busy city gradually dimming its lights, the constant chatter of wakefulness starts to fade. But this is not shutdown, not even close. It's preparation. Because over the next several hours, your body will accomplish tasks that are nearly impossible while you're awake. It will repair, clean, organize, strengthen, protect, all while you remain completely unaware. You have only just fallen asleep, and already the night shift has begun.
Within minutes, you've entered the first stage of sleep. It is the lightest sleep of the night. If someone gently called your name, you might still wake up without realizing you had been asleep at all. Yet inside your brain, something remarkable has already begun. The constant stream of information that filled your waking hours is finally slowing down. Throughout the day, your senses have been flooded with sights, sounds, voices, memories, decisions, and countless tiny details your brain has worked tirelessly to process. Now, for the first time in many hours, the flow begins to quiet. Your brain no longer needs to react to every sound in the room, every movement around you, or every passing thought. Instead, it starts deciding what is worth keeping and what can simply fade away. Scientists often compare this process to organizing a busy desk at the end of a long day. Important papers are carefully filed. Temporary notes are discarded. The workspace is cleared, ready for tomorrow. Your brain appears to do something surprisingly similar. The experiences of your day, the conversations you had, the places you visited, the names you learned, all begin passing through a complex process of sorting and organization. Not every memory survives. Most never will. In fact, your brain is constantly forgetting, and that's a good thing. If every single moment of every single day were stored forever, your mind would quickly become overwhelmed. Forgetting is not a flaw. It is one of the brain's greatest abilities. It creates room for what truly matters. As this quiet sorting continues, tiny bursts of electrical activity ripple across the surface of your brain. Scientists call some of these bursts sleep spindles. They last only a second or two, yet they appear to play an important role in strengthening new memories and protecting your sleep from outside disturbances. Another pattern, known as K-complexes, acts almost like a silent guard. A sudden sound, the creak of a floor, the distant closing of a door, may trigger one of these large electrical waves. Your brain briefly checks whether the sound represents danger. If it doesn't, you remain asleep without ever becoming aware that anything happened. It's a remarkable balance. Even while resting, your brain never completely stops watching over you. It simply becomes far more selective. Outside, the world continues exactly as before. Cars pass in the distance. The wind moves through the trees. Somewhere, a dog barks. A clock quietly marks another passing minute. Most of it never reaches your awareness. Your brain has gently lowered the volume of the outside world so it can focus on something much more important, the work taking place within. And soon, you'll descend even deeper into the stage of sleep where the body begins its greatest repairs and the brain starts one of the most extraordinary cleaning processes ever discovered.
As the night grows quieter, your brain slips into deep sleep. This is the slowest and perhaps the most important stage of the entire night. The electrical activity inside your brain changes dramatically. Instead of the fast, complex patterns of wakefulness, billions of neurons begin firing together in long, powerful, rhythmic waves. Scientists call them slow waves. If we could listen to your brain, its activity would no longer resemble the busy streets of a city. It would sound more like the gentle rhythm of the ocean, steady, peaceful, patient. This is the time your body has been waiting for. Your heartbeat reaches one of its slowest rhythms of the day. Blood pressure falls. Breathing becomes deep and effortless. Energy that was spent on movement, attention, and constant decision-making is now redirected toward restoration. Deep within your pituitary gland, a powerful wave of growth hormone enters your bloodstream. Despite its name, this hormone isn't only for children. Every night, Throughout your entire life, it helps repair tiny injuries that accumulated during the day. Muscle fibers damaged by exercise begin rebuilding themselves. Proteins are assembled. Cells replace worn-out components. Even your bones quietly strengthen themselves, one microscopic repair at a time. Meanwhile, your immune system becomes unusually active. Specialized immune cells travel through your body, searching for viruses, bacteria, and damaged tissue. Some identify unwanted invaders. Others coordinate the body's response. Others simply stand ready, waiting for tomorrow's challenges. It's one reason a good night's sleep often helps us recover from illness. Your body isn't simply resting, it's preparing for the next battle. Even small cuts, strained muscles, or tiny areas of inflammation receive extra attention during these hours. Almost every tissue, from your skin to your organs, benefits from this nightly maintenance. And then, something even more extraordinary begins. For decades, scientists believed the sleeping brain simply rested. But in recent years, they discovered something few people ever imagined. While you sleep, your brain begins cleaning itself. Unlike the rest of the body, the brain has no traditional lymphatic system to carry away waste. Instead, it uses a remarkable process found almost nowhere else. As deep sleep continues, support cells within the brain begin to shrink ever so slightly. The tiny spaces between brain cells become wider, only by a fraction, but enough for clear fluid, called cerebrospinal fluid, to flow more freely through the brain. Like gentle waves washing along a quiet shoreline, this fluid moves through delicate pathways, collecting microscopic waste products left behind after a long day of thinking, remembering, learning, and living. Some of these waste molecules, if allowed to accumulate for years, have been linked to diseases such as Alzheimer's. Night after night, your brain quietly removes them without asking for thanks, without making a sound. You never notice it happening. You cannot feel it. Yet it may be one of the most important reasons sleep is essential for life itself. As you lie peacefully asleep, your brain is performing one of nature's most elegant acts of housekeeping. Not because something has gone wrong, but because tomorrow it intends to do it all again.
For nearly an hour, your body has been almost completely still. Yet inside your mind, the night is about to change once again. The deep, slow waves that carried your brain through its most restorative work begin to fade. Your heartbeat becomes slightly less regular. Your breathing changes. Tiny muscles beneath your closed eyelids begin to twitch. Without opening your eyes, you are entering one of the strangest states in all of biology: rapid eye movement sleep, better known simply as REM sleep. If someone looked at you now, they might think you were waking up. Your brain suddenly becomes astonishingly active. In some regions, its activity is almost as intense as when you're fully awake. Yet, your body remains almost completely motionless. This remarkable combination has fascinated scientists for generations. A highly active brain inside an almost perfectly still body. To prevent you from acting out your dreams, your brain temporarily switches off most voluntary muscles. Signals traveling from the brain toward your arms, your legs, and your torso are deliberately blocked. Only the muscles responsible for breathing, eye movement, and a few essential functions remain active. It's an extraordinary safety system. Without it, a simple dream of running could send you running across the room. Now, the theater of dreams begins. Exactly why we dream remains one of science's greatest mysteries. There is no single answer. Some researchers believe dreams help organize memories. Others think they allow the brain to simulate situations, solve problems, or process emotions from the day. Perhaps they do all of these things, or perhaps something even more remarkable that we have yet to understand. What we do know is that dreaming is not random chaos. The brain carefully selects fragments of memory, faces you've seen, places you have visited, voices you have heard, emotions you have felt, and weaves them together into stories that often seem completely real. A childhood home may appear beside a city you've never visited. Someone you met yesterday might speak with the voice of a teacher from years ago. Time itself becomes strangely flexible. Hours can seem like seconds. Seconds can feel like entire lifetimes. Meanwhile, outside your awareness, your emotional centers remain especially active. The amygdala, which helps process fear, joy, and many other emotions, often becomes more engaged than the logical regions responsible for careful reasoning. That may explain why dreams feel so vivid and why the impossible rarely seems impossible until we wake. During these quiet hours, your brain is not escaping reality. It is exploring it in a different language, a language made of memory, emotion, imagination, and possibility. By morning, most dreams will quietly disappear. Within minutes of waking, many will already be forgotten, not because they lacked meaning, but because the brain has completed the work it needed them to do. As the night continues, your body will move between deep sleep, lighter sleep, and dreaming again and again. Each one slightly different from the last, each one perfectly timed, a rhythm refined through millions of years of evolution. While you sleep peacefully, your body follows this invisible schedule with astonishing precision. No conscious thought is required, no effort, no instruction. Only time and the quiet wisdom written into every living cell.
As the hours pass, something remarkable begins to happen. The balance of the night slowly changes. Earlier, deep sleep occupied much of your time. Now, those long periods become shorter. Dreams begin to last longer. Each sleep cycle gently shifts, preparing you for the return of daylight. But while your mind continues its quiet journey, another part of your body has been working with extraordinary precision all along: your heart. On average, it has beaten more than 20,000 times since you fell asleep, not with the urgency of the daytime, but with calm efficiency. As your body relaxed, your heart no longer needed to push blood as forcefully through your arteries. Your blood pressure gradually fell. This nightly reduction, sometimes called the nocturnal dip, gives your cardiovascular system a chance to recover from the constant demands of the day. It's as though your heart finally receives permission to lower its voice. Yet it never truly rests. With every beat, oxygen continues reaching every organ, every muscle, every cell. Your brain, despite making up only about 2% of your body weight, continues receiving a remarkable share of that blood. Because even during sleep, it remains one of the most energy-hungry organs you possess. Your lungs keep perfect rhythm with your heart, Each slow breath brings fresh oxygen into millions of tiny air sacs called alveoli. Together, they create an enormous surface area for exchanging gases. If all those delicate air sacs could somehow be spread flat, they would cover an area roughly the size of a tennis court. Each quiet breath supports a microscopic exchange happening hundreds of millions of times. Oxygen enters your blood. Carbon dioxide leaves, over and over, without pause. Meanwhile, your liver continues one of the busiest jobs in your body, filtering your blood, breaking down unwanted substances, managing nutrients, releasing stored glucose whenever it's needed. Even while you sleep, it never clocks out. Your kidneys are equally busy. Every minute, they filter your blood with astonishing accuracy, removing waste, balancing minerals, carefully adjusting the amount of water your body keeps. By morning, they will have filtered dozens of liters of blood without you noticing a single moment of their work. Even your skin, the largest organ of your body, has entered one of its busiest periods. New skin cells replace older ones. Tiny damage from sunlight, dry air, or daily wear begins to heal. Collagen production increases. Microscopic repairs continue hour after hour. Your body isn't trying to become younger, it's simply trying to keep you healthy for one more day, and then another, and another after that. Perhaps the most extraordinary part is the coordination. No central manager is issuing commands every second. No conscious mind is directing the process. Instead, trillions of cells communicate continuously through chemical signals, electrical impulses, and ancient biological rhythms that evolved over countless generations. Each cell performs only a tiny task, yet together they create one of the most complex systems known in the universe. A system quietly caring for you while you remain completely unaware. By now, the first faint signs of morning are still hidden beyond the horizon, but your body already knows that dawn is getting closer.
As the night begins to thin, your body starts preparing for something it has done every single day of your life: waking. Deep inside your brain, a tiny cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus acts like an internal clock. It has tracked the passing hours in silence, guided by light you never noticed, and rhythms written into your biology long before you were born. Now, it begins to shift the entire system forward. Melatonin levels slowly drop. The chemical that held you in darkness fades like a dimming light. At the same time, another hormone begins to rise: cortisol, often misunderstood as a stress hormone, but in reality, it is your body's natural signal for activation, not danger, readiness. Energy begins to return, not all at once, but in layers. First, your breathing subtly changes, becoming a little more alert. Then your heart rate follows, a gentle acceleration, like an engine coming back to idle. Inside your brain, spindles and slow waves begin to disappear, and in their place, faster patterns re-emerge. The same kind of electrical activity that carries you through thought, speech, and awareness. But you are not fully awake yet. You are in a transition, a fragile bridge between two worlds. Then comes one of the most important environmental cues of all: light.
Even a small amount entering your eyes triggers specialized cells in your retina, not for vision, but for timing. They send a direct signal to your internal clock, telling it one simple truth: the day has begun. Your brain responds immediately. Body temperature starts to rise, muscles regain tone, reflexes sharpen, and slowly, conscious awareness begins to surface, not as a sudden switch, but like a tide rising inside your mind. First, there is awareness without thought, then thought without clarity. Then, finally, you return to yourself. Most dreams are already dissolving, like mist evaporating under sunlight. Their details fade within seconds. What remains is often only a feeling, not a story, not a sequence, just emotion. Meanwhile, your body completes its final overnight repairs. Cells finish their last rounds of maintenance. Hormonal systems rebalance. Your brain performs a final sweep, storing what matters and discarding what doesn't. And then the transition completes. You are awake, but you are not the same system that closed its eyes hours ago. Inside you, millions of microscopic processes have reset, repaired, rebalanced, and restored. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough for another day, another cycle, another return to the night, when the entire process will begin again, quietly, automatically, faithfully, as it always has.
And yet, even as you open your eyes, the story of sleep is not truly finished. It continues to echo through your waking hours, in the way you think a little more clearly, in the way your mood feels slightly more stable, in the way your body responds to stress, not as sharply, but with a kind of quiet resilience. Because sleep does not end when morning begins. It simply changes its form. Now it becomes performance, focus, memory, emotional balance. Every conversation you will have today, every decision you will make, every moment you will feel present in your own life will quietly carry the imprint of the night that just passed. But most people never notice this, because sleep is invisible when it works well. It never announces itself. It never demands recognition. It simply restores you, so you can forget that you were ever falling apart. And tonight, when the world grows quiet again, when light fades from your surroundings and your thoughts begin to slow, the same ancient sequence will return, not changed, not improvised, but refined over hundreds of millions of years. Your brain will once again drift downward into deep waves. Your body will repair what it has worn down. Your mind will dream in fragments of memory and emotion, and your systems will reset themselves without asking permission. You do not control this process. You participate in it. That is what it means to be alive. And as the final traces of wakefulness dissolve, there is only one thing left to do: let go and begin again. And somewhere beyond awareness, your body is already preparing for that return. Because sleep is not a single event. It is a cycle, a rhythm, a pattern that repeats itself through the night, 4, sometimes 5 times, each cycle slightly different from the last. The first cycles of sleep are dominated by deep restoration, slow waves, repair, recovery. But as morning approaches, something subtle changes. the balance shifts. Deep sleep shortens, REM sleep expands. Dreams become longer, more vivid, more emotionally complex. It is as if the brain saves its most intricate work for the final hours, not because it is less important, but because it is preparing you for waking life, for emotion, for memory integration, for the unpredictable nature of being conscious in a world that never pauses. And even the timing of your sleep is not random.
Inside you, a biological rhythm continues to tick forward. A clock that does not rely on alarms or calendars. It is called the circadian rhythm. It aligns you with the rising and setting of the sun, even when you are not aware of it. Light in the morning resets it. Darkness in the evening releases it. And in between, it quietly governs almost every system in your body. Hormones, temperature, alertness, digestion, even your sense of time itself. This is why a single night of poor sleep feels like more than fatigue. It distorts your entire internal balance. Attention becomes fragmented. Emotions become louder. Small problems feel larger than they are, not because reality has changed, but because the system interpreting reality has been slightly destabilized. And yet, your body is remarkably forgiving. Give it enough time, and it begins to repair even the consequences of lost sleep. Cycle by cycle, night by night, it tries again, always returning to balance, always seeking restoration. And so the question is never whether sleep will happen. It will. The question is only whether it will be enough. Enough deep sleep to rebuild the body. Enough REM sleep to stabilize the mind. Enough cycles to carry you cleanly into the next day. Because every day you experience is not separate from the night before it. It is its continuation, the visible half of an invisible process. And as you move through your waking life, unaware of the machinery beneath it all, your body carries a quiet certainty that when the light fades again, when the world slows down, when consciousness loosens its grip, it will return to what it knows best: repair, restore, and prepare you once more for being alive. Then, there's something most people never think about while they are awake. Your body is not only recovering from yesterday, it is also preparing for tomorrow. Even during sleep, your brain is not simply repairing damage. It is updating itself, rewiring, reorganizing, strengthening certain connections and quietly weakening others. Neurons that were frequently used during the day become more stable. Patterns that were repeated become more efficient. And connections that were unnecessary begin to fade. This is not random forgetting. It is biological optimization, a kind of internal editing process happening beneath consciousness, like a massive library being reorganized every night so that the most important books are always easiest to find. But this restructuring is not limited to memory. It also shapes who you are emotionally. Because sleep does something subtle but powerful to your emotional brain. During REM sleep, the emotional intensity of experiences is gradually recalibrated. Painful memories do not disappear, but their sharp edges soften. The emotional charge attached to them is reduced, so that when you wake up, you can remember what happened without being trapped inside how it felt. This is one of the quietest forms of healing the body performs, not by erasing the past, but by changing your relationship to it. And while this happens inside the brain, something equally important is happening outside of it. Your hormonal system is resetting its sensitivity. Cells that stopped responding properly during stress begin to recover their balance.
Inflammatory signals are reduced. Repair signals are strengthened. It is a full-body recalibration, not focused on one system, but on all systems at once, working together without instruction, without awareness, without effort. And the deeper you go into sleep cycles across a lifetime, the more refined this process becomes. Your brain learns what to keep, what to soften, what to strengthen, and what to let go. Not as a conscious decision, but as a biological consequence of repetition. Night after night, year after year, this invisible editing shapes your mental stability, your resilience, and even your personality. Because you are not the same person who fell asleep years ago. You are the accumulation of every night of sleep you have ever had, and every night you have ever missed. And still, despite all this complexity, there is no sign that the process is slowing down. No hesitation, no awareness, only continuation. A system so deeply embedded in life itself that it runs even when everything else stops. And somewhere within this endless cycle, your next transition is already being prepared.
Even now, before you are aware of it, your brain is already beginning to predict the next shift. Because sleep is not only reactive, it is anticipatory. Long before you actually fall asleep, your internal systems start adjusting. Body temperature begins to drop slightly. Alertness naturally decreases. Reaction time slows. And the pressure to sleep quietly builds in the background, like water filling an unseen reservoir. This is called sleep pressure. It is created throughout the day as a byproduct of being awake. Every thought, every movement, every moment of attention adds to it, and the longer you stay awake, the stronger it becomes, until eventually it reaches a threshold and the transition becomes inevitable. But even this pressure is not acting alone. It is balanced by your circadian rhythm. Two systems working in opposition, yet perfectly coordinated. One tells you you need sleep. The other tells you now is the right time. When they align, sleep becomes effortless. When they misalign, you feel the strange discomfort of being tired but awake, or alert but forced to sleep. And this delicate balance is one of the reasons modern life often feels disconnected. Artificial light, screens, irregular schedules. They do not break the system, but they distort the timing. They shift signals that were once stable for millions of years. And yet, the underlying mechanism remains intact, still waiting, still functioning, still counting the hours in silence. As night approaches again in the cycle of days, your brain begins another quiet preparation. It reduces external awareness. It filters sensory input more aggressively. It starts prioritizing internal signals over external ones, until the world outside slowly loses importance. Not because it disappears, but because it is being temporarily set aside. And in that gradual withdrawal from the outside world, something else begins to surface. A return inward, to memory, to imagination, to the same mysterious space where dreams will soon begin again, and the next cycle of restoration will quietly take over once more. And as this inward shift deepens, your brain begins to reorganize attention itself. During wakefulness, attention is constantly pulled outward. Sounds, light, thoughts, decisions. But as sleep pressure increases, that outward pull weakens, and attention slowly turns inward. not in a conscious way, but in layers of diminishing responsiveness. At first, you still respond quickly to your environment, then slightly slower, then inconsistently, until finally external signals lose priority altogether. This is the threshold where sleep becomes possible, not because you choose it, but because the brain stops treating the outside world as the primary source of information. And once that threshold is crossed, the transition into sleep does not happen all at once. It happens in fragments, micro-shifts, small dissolves of awareness, moments where thought continues, but structure begins to loosen. You may not notice it, but your brain does something remarkable here. It begins to decouple perception from awareness, meaning signals can still enter the brain, but they are no longer fully constructed into conscious experience. This is why sounds can fade into dreams or become part of them, why external reality can mix with internal imagery without clear boundaries. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning and self-monitoring, starts to reduce its activity, not shutting down completely, but stepping back, allowing other systems to take over. Systems that are older, more automatic, more deeply rooted in survival and memory. And as this shift continues, the brain begins to favor association over logic, connection over structure, emotion over analysis. This is the architecture from which dreams eventually emerge, not as random stories, but as the natural result of a system temporarily freed from strict control. Meanwhile, the body mirrors this transition in its own quiet way. Muscle tone begins to decrease, eye movement slow, breathing becomes more regular, and the boundary between you and rest starts to blur, not in identity, but in physiology. You are not gone, you are simply transitioning into a different mode of existence, one that has been part of life since the earliest vertebrates, long before modern consciousness ever existed. And still, even at this stage, the brain continues one final layer of preparation, as if aligning all internal systems for what comes next. And just beneath this threshold, something fundamental begins to change in timing itself. Because sleep is not only a state, it is also a sequence, a carefully ordered descent through stages that repeat and loop throughout the night. Stage 1 is the bridge, where waking thought still lingers but begins to fragment. Stage 2 is where the brain introduces its first real signature patterns, sleep spindles, short bursts of electrical activity that seem to act like a protective filter, blocking irrelevant information from disturbing the system. And then deep sleep arrives again, slow waves returning, pulling the brain into its most restorative phase. But this descent is not permanent. It is cyclical. The brain does not stay in one state for the entire night. It moves down and up and down again, from deep restoration to lighter monitoring, to dreaming and back again, each cycle lasting roughly 90 minutes, repeating several times across the night. And with each repetition, something subtle shifts. The proportion of stages changes. Early night favors deep sleep. Late night favors REM, as if the brain is dividing its work. First, repair the body. Then, organize the mind. Then, integrate emotion. Then, simulate experience. all in a sequence so precise that it appears almost engineered. But it is not engineered. It is evolved, a product of millions of years of refinement across countless generations of living organisms. And even now, it continues without interruption. No pause, no deviation, only rhythm, only repetition, only continuation as the cycle deepens once more. And within this repetition, there is another layer most people never notice. Because the brain is not only cycling through sleep stages, it is also cycling through levels of memory processing. Not all memories are treated equally. Some are immediately prioritized, others are held loosely, and many are quietly discarded without ever reaching conscious awareness again. During the night, the hippocampus acts like a temporary storage hub. It replays fragments of the day, not as full experiences, but as compressed patterns, a sound, a face, a feeling, a decision. These fragments are then gradually transferred to the cortex, where long-term storage becomes more stable. This transfer is not instantaneous. It requires repetition, reactivation, reorganization, like copying files, but not in a straight line. Instead, the brain rewrites them, integrating new information with existing networks. This is why sleep is so critical for learning, not because it stores memories, but because it decides how they will exist inside you. And in parallel, another process is unfolding, a quieter one, synaptic downscaling. Throughout the day, billions of synapses strengthen as you learn, react, and experience. But if everything stayed strengthened, the system would become overloaded. So, during sleep, the brain reduces overall synaptic intensity, not deleting information, but restoring balance, keeping what matters strong and gently weakening what does not. This is efficiency at scale, a system managing itself without central control. And as these microscopic adjustments continue, your consciousness drifts further away from external reality, not disappearing, but thinning, like a signal slowly moving out of range. Thought becomes less linear, time becomes less stable, identity becomes less anchored to narrative, and what remains is pure experience, untethered from waking structure, sliding deeper into the architecture of sleep itself.
And as that structure loosens even further, the boundary between cycles begins to blur. What was once a clear sequence, stage after stage, deep sleep into REM, REM back into light sleep, now starts to feel seamless, continuous, almost like a single flowing current rather than distinct phases. But inside the brain, nothing is actually blurred. It is precisely coordinated, just no longer experienced, because experience itself is what is fading. At this depth, the default mode networks that construct self-awareness quiet down significantly. The ongoing inner narration, the sense of I am here, the subtle simulation of identity, all begin to reduce in strength. Not erased, just deprioritized. And in their absence, something else becomes more dominant. Raw neural processing, without interpretation, without commentary, without narrative framing. This is why deep sleep feels like nothing, not because nothing is happening, but because nothing is being constructed into experience. Meanwhile, REM sleep begins to take on a different role in the later cycles of the night. It becomes more emotionally refined, less chaotic than early night dreaming, more structured, more symbolic, more integrated with long-term memory systems. The brain is no longer just generating dream fragments, it is refining them, testing emotional outcomes, reprocessing old experiences with new context, rewriting meaning without altering facts. And across all of this, a deeper regulatory system continues to stabilize the entire organism, the autonomic nervous system, shifting gently between sympathetic and parasympathetic balance, ensuring that no single system drifts too far from equilibrium. Heart rate variability adjusts, hormonal pulses synchronize, temperature oscillates in subtle waves, all of it coordinated, all of it automatic, all of it invisible to awareness. And still, the cycle does not end. It continues to rotate through the night, each pass slightly different, each return slightly refined, as the body moves closer to the final transition that always comes before morning. And as that final approach begins, the rhythm of the night starts to change its character once again, not abruptly, but with increasing direction. The randomness of deeper cycles slowly gives way to structure, as if the entire system is quietly aligning itself toward one outcome: wakefulness. REM periods grow longer and more frequent. Deep sleep becomes shorter and more fragmented. Light sleep acts as a bridge between both states, more active than before, more sensitive to external signals, more ready to be interrupted. This is not a breakdown of sleep, it is its completion, because sleep is not designed to remain stable indefinitely. It is designed to resolve, to prepare a system for re-entry into the world. And so, as morning draws closer, the brain begins to shift its priorities. Internal maintenance is reduced, external responsiveness is increased, sensory thresholds lower slightly so that sound and light can more easily reach awareness. Even before waking, the brain is already listening to the environment, checking temperature, detecting light patterns, tracking subtle cues that signal time. Meanwhile, the body begins its slow reversal of nighttime physiology. Core temperature starts to rise again. Cortisol follows its early morning surge pattern. Blood pressure gradually increases. Metabolic rate begins to lift from its lowest nocturnal point. It is as if the entire organism is gently re-energizing, layer by layer, system by system, without urgency, but with precision. And in the brain, the final REM cycles often carry the most vivid and emotionally complex dreams of the night, not because they are more random, but because they are closer to waking cognition, more integrated with memory, more influenced by recent experience, more capable of producing narratives that feel real even after waking. Then, as these final cycles end, something subtle happens, a shift in dominance, from internal simulation to external awareness, from dreaming to sensing, from sleeping to being ready. And this readiness does not announce itself. It accumulates quietly until it crosses a threshold and consciousness begins to return once again.
And just before that threshold is crossed, There is a brief, almost imperceptible state that connects sleep and waking, a liminal zone, neither fully dream nor fully reality. Neuroscientists sometimes describe it as hypnopompic transition, but in experience it feels simpler than any name can capture. Fragments of thought begin to stabilize. Images lose their surreal logic. Sound becomes more consistent. Time starts to behave normally again. And the brain, still partially in sleep mode, begins to reassemble the structure of waking consciousness. One of the last systems to fully re-engage is working memory, the ability to hold thoughts in a stable, linear sequence. Before this fully returns, thinking can feel scattered, non-linear, disjointed. But as networks in the prefrontal cortex reactivate, coherence returns, thought becomes continuous again, identity becomes anchored again, I becomes stable again. At the same time, the sensory processing systems complete their full reactivation. Vision sharpens, auditory filtering reduces. The brain stops treating external signals as noise and begins to treat them as reality. Meanwhile, the hippocampus completes its final overnight transfer of memory traces. The last fragments of the night are either stored or dissolved. Dream content that briefly felt significant begins to evaporate, not because it was meaningless, but because its role is complete. And in parallel, the thalamus resumes its full gating function, re-establishing the constant flow of sensory information to the cortex. This is the moment where sleep truly ends, even if the eyes have not yet opened, because internally the system has already switched modes, from maintenance to interaction, from restoration to engagement, from simulation to reality. And then it happens. The final shift. Not dramatic, not sudden, but absolute. Consciousness fully returns. The body is awake. The brain is online, and the cycle resets its position in time, ready to begin the next chapter of experience. But even now, the story is not finished. It has only changed states again. And now you are fully awake. But your body does not treat waking as a single moment. It treats it as a phase. The first minutes after waking are still part of a transition window where sleep inertia can linger beneath awareness. Reaction times are slightly slower. Attention is still stabilizing. The brain is still completing internal housekeeping tasks from the night before. Some neural networks are already fully active, while others are only gradually coming online. It is not all or nothing. It is staggered, layered. And during this early wakefulness, your brain performs one final quiet sweep. It consolidates the boundary between night and day, dream and reality, memory and imagination. Anything that does not fit stable encoding is gently released. This is why dreams feel so fragile in the morning, not because they were weak, but because they were never meant to be stored as fixed records. They were processing states, not finished products. And as this clearing completes, your sense of self becomes fully synchronized again. Thought becomes structured. Time becomes linear. Purpose begins to reassemble itself. You are now fully in the waking state. But even here, nothing is static, because the same biological systems that guided you to sleep are still active in reverse. Your circadian rhythm is now in its daytime phase, promoting alertness, supporting focus, enhancing sensory processing, regulating energy distribution across the body. And as the hours of the day begin to unfold, your brain starts a different kind of work. Not restoration, but interaction. Every experience you have today will begin the next cycle of encoding. Every conversation, every image, every decision will slowly become material for tonight's sleep. Because the process never stops. It only changes direction. Night collects the day, and day prepares the night. They are not opposites. They are one continuous system, folding into itself again and again, without beginning and without end. And somewhere deep inside that rhythm, your body already knows something you do not consciously think about, that tonight, when light fades again, when stimulation slows, and when awareness begins to drift, it will all happen once more, exactly as it always has, exactly as it always will. And the cycle, quietly, continues.
And as the day fully takes hold, there is something easy to forget. You are not the first version of life that needed sleep, and you will not be the last. Because sleep is not a modern feature of humans, it is ancient, older than language, older than thought. Even primitive nervous systems show rhythmic cycles of activity and rest, as if life itself discovered early that constant activity is unsustainable. So it built an escape, a pause, a controlled descent into reduced awareness where repair becomes possible. Over millions of years, this pattern was refined. In fish, in reptiles, in birds, in mammals, the same fundamental rhythm persists: activity, rest, recalibration, return. And in humans, it became more complex than in almost any other known species. Because alongside physical restoration, sleep began to support something new: memory, learning, emotional regulation, identity itself. Not just survival, but continuity of self across time. Meanwhile, on a planetary scale, your sleep is still tied to a larger motion you never notice: the rotation of the Earth. Every 24 hours, light moves across the surface of the planet, not chasing you, but synchronizing you. Your biology did not invent this rhythm. It adapted to it, and now it depends on it. This is why artificial environments can feel strangely disorienting, because they preserve light but not timing, presence but not rhythm, and your body notices even when your mind does not. In modern life, this creates a subtle tension. You can be awake at the wrong biological time and asleep at the wrong biological time, without fully realizing why everything feels slightly off. Not broken, just misaligned. But the underlying system never stops trying to correct it. Every morning light exposure, every night of darkness, every cycle of consistency is a signal being written back into your biology, a reminder of the original rhythm. And as long as that rhythm exists, your body continues to rebuild itself around it, day by day, night by night, cycle by cycle.
And somewhere in that endless oscillation between alertness and rest, your life is being quietly shaped, not in big moments, but in the invisible gaps between them, where you are not doing, not thinking, not deciding, but simply being maintained for what comes next. And what comes next is not a destination, but another turning of the system, because even the feeling of now is temporary. It is constructed in real time by the brain, held together for only a few seconds at a time, then replaced by the next now, again and again, like frames in a film that you never see as separate images. Your entire waking experience is built on this continuous reconstruction, a constant update, a seamless illusion of continuity. And sleep is the interruption that repairs the mechanism producing that illusion. During the day, your brain accumulates noise, not just external information, but internal variability, unfinished thoughts, emotional traces, metabolic byproducts of constant neural firing, small inconsistencies in synaptic strength, tiny deviations in chemical balance. None of these are dangerous on their own, but together they create drift. And sleep is what corrects that drift. It resets probability. It recalibrates thresholds. It restores signal clarity. Not to a perfect state, but to a workable one. One that allows another day of functioning consciousness. And so the cycle is not about perfection, it is about sustainability. You do not return to the same exact brain each morning. You return to a slightly adjusted version, one shaped by everything you experienced and everything you processed during the night. This is why learning is not instantaneous, and why change is not immediate. Because nothing in the system updates in a single moment. It updates in cycles, and each cycle depends on the one before it. Day influences night, night influences day, and neither can be separated without losing the whole structure. Even your sense of continuity, your personality, your preferences, your emotional patterns are all the result of repeated overnight adjustments layered over time. Not stored in one place, but distributed across millions of changing connections, constantly being refined, never finalized. And still, as you move forward through the day, your brain is already preparing the conditions for the next descent, slowly, silently, automatically, because it never forgets what it is designed to do. It waits for the return of darkness, for the reduction of input, for the softening of awareness, when once again the system will shift away from the outside world and begin the process all over again, as it always has and always will.
And in the end, there is nothing to finish, because nothing here was ever truly separate. Not the night, not the day, not the body rebuilding itself in silence, not the mind drifting through dreams it will never fully remember. It was never a series of events. It was always one continuous process, folding back into itself again and again, without asking for attention, without needing understanding, without ever stopping. You will not notice most of it. You were never meant to, because awareness is not the center of the system. It is just the surface of it, a thin layer riding on top of something far older, far deeper, and far more patient than thought itself. And so the story does not end here, because it was never a story in the first place. It was a rhythm, and rhythms do not end. They repeat, quietly, faithfully, endlessly, until there is no distinction left between rest and return, between sleep and waking, between you and the cycle that carries you forward.
What if, starting tonight, you never slept again? Not for one night, not for two, not ever. At first, it wouldn't seem like an emergency. You might yawn a little more than usual. Your coffee might taste better than ever. You'd tell yourself, I'll sleep tomorrow. But tomorrow never comes. Hour after hour, your body keeps waiting for something that never happens. A repair process that never begins. A cleanup operation that never starts. Deep inside your brain, billions of cells continue working without the rest they were designed to receive. Your heart keeps beating, your lungs keep breathing, your liver keeps processing nutrients. Everything appears normal, until it isn't. Because sleep isn't simply the absence of being awake. It is one of the most essential biological processes on Earth. Every animal we've ever studied, from tiny insects to giant whales, spends part of its life asleep. Evolution has had hundreds of millions of years to eliminate unnecessary behaviors, yet sleep survived. That alone tells us something remarkable. It isn't a luxury. It isn't wasted time. It's a biological necessity. Tonight, we're going to follow exactly what happens when that necessity disappears. Hour by hour, day by day. We'll watch the brain struggle to stay awake. We'll see memories begin to fail, emotions lose control, reality itself begin to distort. And we'll discover why, despite all of modern science, no human has ever found a way to escape the need for sleep. The clock reads 10 p.m. Normally, this is when your body begins preparing for sleep. As darkness settles around you, your brain quietly releases melatonin. Your core body temperature begins to fall. Your heart slows slightly. Your muscles relax. Across your entire body, thousands of tiny changes begin guiding you toward sleep. But tonight, you ignore every one of them. You stay awake. At first, nothing dramatic happens. You can still think. You can still talk. You can still work. If someone looked at you, they might not notice anything unusual. But inside your brain, a chemical called adenosine is quietly building up. Every hour you're awake, more of it accumulates. Think of adenosine as your brain's pressure gauge. The longer you stay awake, the stronger the pressure becomes. It's simply becoming less able to regulate itself. This growing pressure creates what scientists call sleep drive. It's your brain's way of saying, it's time. Normally, you'd fall asleep. The pressure would disappear. Your brain would reset. But tonight, there is no reset. Midnight arrives. Your eyelids feel heavier. Concentration takes a little more effort. You reread the same sentence twice. You forget why you walked into a room. Small mistakes begin appearing. Not because you're lazy, not because you're distracted, because the brain itself is beginning to lose efficiency. Around 2 in the morning, another system joins the struggle. your circadian rhythm. Deep inside your brain, a tiny cluster of neurons called the suprachiasmatic nucleus has spent your entire life acting as your internal clock. It doesn't care about meetings or deadlines or your determination to stay awake. It follows light. Darkness tells it night has arrived. Every cell in your body begins expecting sleep, but sleep never comes. And for the first time, two powerful biological systems, your circadian clock and your sleep drive, are pushing in the same direction. Stay awake, no matter what. Your body wants the exact opposite. By 3 in the morning, your brain begins making choices it normally wouldn't. Simple decisions take longer. Words become harder to find. You may start laughing at things that aren't particularly funny, or become irritated over something completely insignificant. Your emotional balance is already beginning to shift. One reason lies deep inside the brain. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning, judgment, self-control, and logical thinking, is one of the first areas to lose efficiency when sleep is delayed. Normally, it helps keep your emotions in check. It weighs consequences. It slows impulsive reactions. It tells you to pause before you speak. But as wakefulness stretches on, that control begins to weaken. At the same time, another structure becomes more active: the amygdala, your brain's emotional alarm system. It evolved to detect danger and react quickly. Without enough sleep, the balance between these two regions begins to change. Logic becomes quieter, emotion becomes louder. It's one reason why even a single sleepless night can make small problems feel much bigger than they really are. A harmless comment might feel like an insult, a minor inconvenience like a disaster. Your brain isn't trying to make life difficult. It's simply becoming less able to regulate itself. By 4 in the morning, your attention begins to fragment. You aren't asleep, but you aren't fully awake either. For brief moments, parts of your brain may actually shut down, even while your eyes remain open. Scientists call these microsleeps. They can last less than a second or several seconds at a time. Most people never notice them, but during those tiny gaps, the brain simply stops processing the outside world. Imagine driving on a highway, traveling at full speed, and your brain disconnects for 3 seconds. Your eyes may still be open, your hands may still be on the steering wheel, but your awareness disappears. At highway speeds, 3 seconds is enough to travel the length of a football field without consciously seeing any of it. This is why sleep deprivation is so dangerous. It doesn't always make you feel asleep. Sometimes it makes you believe you're still fully awake. As dawn approaches, your body receives its first morning signal. Light reaches your eyes. Melatonin production begins to fall. Cortisol, often called the body's wake-up hormone, starts rising. Normally, this would help you wake after a full night's sleep, but today, there was no sleep to wake from. Instead, your body attempts something remarkable. It tries to keep you functioning anyway. Adrenaline increases. Stress hormones help compensate. You may even experience what many people describe as a second wind. For a short time, you actually feel more alert. It's a deceptive feeling, because underneath that temporary boost, sleep pressure continues building. Nothing has been repaired. Nothing has been cleaned. Nothing has been reset. The bill is simply being postponed. And your brain is quietly keeping track of every unpaid hour. Morning arrives. You've now been awake for 24 hours. You might think, I've done this before. Many people have. Students before an exam, parents caring for a newborn, doctors working overnight shifts, long-haul drivers, military personnel. It feels survivable, and for most healthy people, one sleepless night isn't immediately life-threatening, but measurable changes are already happening. Your reaction time has slowed dramatically. Studies have shown that after about 24 hours without sleep, your cognitive performance can resemble that of someone who is legally intoxicated in many countries. Not because alcohol is in your bloodstream, but because the brain's ability to process information has slowed to a similar degree. You may not realize it. In fact, sleep deprivation creates another dangerous effect. It reduces your ability to judge how impaired you actually are. You feel capable. You believe you're thinking clearly, but objective tests tell a different story. And this is only the first day. Most people assume the second day will simply feel like the first, only a little worse. It doesn't. Something new begins to happen. Your brain stops fighting sleep and starts stealing it. By the time you've been awake for 36 hours, your body has entered unfamiliar territory. The temporary boost from stress hormones is fading. Coffee no longer feels as effective. Fresh air, bright lights, cold water, they may help for a few minutes, but none of them can replace what your brain actually needs: sleep. Inside your brain, adenosine has continued to accumulate. The pressure is now overwhelming. Imagine trying to hold your breath. At first, it's uncomfortable. Then it becomes difficult. Eventually, your body simply takes over. Sleep works in a surprisingly similar way. The longer you resist, the stronger the biological force becomes. You begin forgetting small things, names, appointments, conversations from only minutes ago. You may walk into a room and have no idea why you went there. Your working memory, the system that temporarily holds information while you use it, is beginning to fail. Tasks that normally require almost no effort now demand complete concentration. Following a conversation becomes harder. Reading the same paragraph twice or even 3 times becomes surprisingly common. It's not that your intelligence has disappeared. Your brain is simply running with fewer available resources. Communication also begins to change. You pause longer before answering questions. You lose your train of thought. Words occasionally come out in the wrong order. Sometimes you know exactly what you want to say, but the right word refuses to appear. Most people describe it as brain fog. Scientists describe it as widespread reductions in cortical efficiency. Different words, same experience. Your brain is becoming less capable of coordinating countless networks that normally work together effortlessly. Emotionally, the changes become even more noticeable. Small frustrations can trigger surprisingly strong reactions. You may become impatient, restless, overly sensitive, or strangely detached. Some people become unusually quiet. Others become impulsive. The exact response differs from person to person, but almost everyone becomes less emotionally stable. Without sleep, your brain finds it increasingly difficult to separate genuine threats from ordinary daily stress.
Meanwhile, your immune system is also beginning to notice the missing sleep. Even after a single sleepless night, the activity of certain immune cells starts to decline. Inflammatory signals begin to rise. Your body enters a state of mild biological stress. Nothing dramatic yet, but the trend has already begun. Night after night, sleep
normally strengthens immune defenses, helps coordinate immune cells, and supports the production of important signaling molecules. Without that nightly maintenance, your defenses slowly become less efficient. It's one reason people who consistently sleep too little are more likely to become sick. The effects aren't always immediate, but they are measurable. Your metabolism is changing as well. The hormones that regulate hunger, ghrelin and leptin, begin shifting out of balance. You may suddenly crave foods rich in sugar, fat, or carbohydrates, not because your body truly needs them, but because your brain is desperately searching for quick energy. This is why sleep deprivation and overeating are so closely linked. When people are exhausted, they don't usually crave salad. They reach for whatever promises fast fuel. Your body is trying to compensate for a problem that food cannot solve. As evening approaches, you've now been awake for nearly 2 full days. Something strange begins happening. The line between wakefulness and sleep starts to blur. You stare at a wall and lose several seconds. Someone asks a question and you realize you never heard it. Your eyes remain open, but your awareness briefly disappears. Micro-sleeps become more frequent, more unpredictable, and far more dangerous, sometimes lasting only a fraction of a second, sometimes several seconds. You cannot control when they happen. You cannot always recognize that they happened. Your brain is no longer asking permission. It's taking tiny pieces of sleep whenever it can, whether you want it to or not. By 48 hours, most people are no longer functioning normally. Concentration has become exhausting. Memory continues to worsen. Reaction times slow even further. Decision-making becomes unreliable. And yet, the most unsettling changes are still ahead. Because after 2 days without sleep, the brain begins to struggle with something even more fundamental: reality itself. 3 days, 72 hours, no sleep. This is where the experience begins to change completely. Until now, you've mostly been fighting exhaustion. Now, your brain begins fighting itself. The first signs are often subtle: a shadow that seems to move, a sound you could have sworn you heard, a face in the corner of your vision that disappears the moment you look directly at it. At first, you dismiss them. You're just tired, or so you think. But they become more frequent, more convincing, and harder to ignore. Your brain was never designed to remain awake for this long. Normally, sleep provides regular periods of maintenance. Neural connections are adjusted. Chemical balances are restored. Waste products are cleared away. Energy reserves are replenished. Without those nightly resets, communication between different regions of the brain becomes increasingly unstable. Information is still flowing, but it's no longer flowing efficiently. Imagine an orchestra with every musician still playing, but without a conductor. The instruments are all there. The music continues, yet slowly it begins to fall apart. One of the most disturbing consequences is the appearance of hallucinations. These aren't dreams. They happen while you're awake. You may see movement that isn't there, hear footsteps, voices, or faint sounds in complete silence. Some people report seeing insects crawling on walls. Others describe figures standing in empty rooms. The experiences vary, but they all share one thing in common. To the person experiencing them, they feel completely real. Why does this happen? Scientists don't believe the brain simply runs out of power. Instead, the boundaries between different states of consciousness begin to weaken. Normally, dreaming belongs to sleep. Reality belongs to wakefulness. But after prolonged sleep deprivation, those boundaries begin to blur. Tiny fragments of dreamlike activity appear during wakefulness. It's almost as if the brain, desperate for sleep, begins forcing pieces of it into consciousness. At the same time, your ability to judge reality continues to decline. You become less certain of what actually happened and what only seemed to happen. Conversations become confusing. Memories become unreliable. Simple problems feel impossibly complex. You may repeat the same task, forgetting you already completed it, or become convinced that someone called your name when no one spoke at all. The frightening part is that you often don't realize anything is wrong. Your confidence can remain surprisingly high, even as your performance collapses. Emotionally, the brain becomes increasingly unstable. Fear, anxiety, frustration, and sadness can all become amplified. Some people become withdrawn. Others become suspicious. Some experience intense mood swings within minutes. The prefrontal cortex, already weakened after the first sleepless night, can no longer regulate emotional responses effectively. Meanwhile, the amygdala continues reacting as though danger is everywhere. Your brain becomes trapped in a constant state of heightened alertness. Ironically, the harder it tries to stay awake, the worse it performs.
Your body is struggling too. Blood pressure may begin rising. Stress hormones remain elevated. Inflammation continues increasing. Your immune defenses grow weaker. Your coordination becomes noticeably impaired. Even walking in a straight line can require concentration. The remarkable thing is, your heart, your lungs, your liver, they're all still working. They're doing everything they can to keep you alive, but they're doing it without the nightly recovery they evolved to expect. It's like asking an engine to run continuously without ever shutting down for maintenance. Eventually, small problems begin accumulating, and over time, those problems become impossible to ignore. By the end of the third day, the question is no longer, can you stay awake? Your body has already answered that. The real question has become, how much longer can your brain keep distinguishing reality from imagination? Because beyond this point, the risks increase dramatically. And although stories often claim that people simply die after a certain number of days without sleep, the truth is both more complicated and even more unsettling. At this point, a question naturally comes to mind. How long could someone actually survive without sleep? The answer is surprisingly difficult, because no ethical scientist has ever allowed an experiment to continue until death. No research study would permit it. The risks become far too great. So, despite decades of sleep research, there is no scientifically established number of days after which a healthy human simply dies from staying awake. And that's an important distinction. Sleep deprivation is unquestionably dangerous, but the exact limit remains unknown. One of the longest, carefully documented cases occurred in 1964. A 17-year-old high school student named Randy Gardner decided to test
how long he could remain awake. His goal was simple: break the world record. Hour after hour, day after day, he stayed awake under observation. At first, the symptoms were familiar: fatigue, poor concentration, mood changes. But as the days passed, the effects became increasingly severe. He experienced memory problems, difficulty speaking, hallucinations, trouble recognizing objects by touch. His coordination deteriorated. Even simple mental tasks became surprisingly difficult. Yet, after more than 11 days without sleep, he didn't die. When the experiment finally ended, he slept, and over the following days, most of his cognitive abilities gradually returned. His story revealed something extraordinary. The human brain is remarkably resilient, but resilience does not mean invincibility. There's another reason this question is so difficult to answer. Outside of controlled experiments, people rarely remain completely awake, even if they believe they have. Microsleeps become unavoidable. A few seconds here, a few seconds there. The brain quietly steals tiny fragments of sleep without permission, and often without awareness. Someone may insist, "I haven't slept at all," but brain recordings often tell a different story. The body, in a sense, finds a way. This explains why truly continuous wakefulness is almost impossible. Sleep isn't simply a choice, it's a biological force. Just as hunger eventually drives you to eat, and thirst eventually drives you to drink, sleep pressure continues building until the brain begins taking control itself. You can resist it for hours, sometimes for days, but eventually, biology always wins. So if most people don't die directly from staying awake, what actually makes prolonged sleep deprivation so dangerous? The answer lies not in one organ, but in the gradual breakdown of many systems at once. The brain struggles to think clearly. The immune system becomes less effective. Hormones lose their normal rhythm. Blood pressure becomes harder to regulate. Metabolism shifts. Inflammation rises. Judgment deteriorates. Reaction time slows. Each individual change may seem manageable, but together they begin to reinforce one another. Like tiny cracks spreading through a bridge, the damage isn't caused by one failure, it's caused by hundreds of small failures happening at the same time. For almost everyone, sleep eventually comes, whether willingly or through brief, uncontrollable microsleeps. But there is one extremely rare condition in which something far more terrifying happens. A condition in which the brain gradually loses the ability to sleep at all, not for one night, not for 1 week, but permanently. And unlike every healthy person, those patients cannot simply catch up on sleep, because their brains have lost the ability to do what every human brain was designed to do.
There is one illness so rare that most doctors will never encounter a single case during their entire career. Yet it has taught scientists one of the most important lessons about sleep ever discovered. It's called fatal familial insomnia. Despite the name, it isn't ordinary insomnia. People with insomnia still have the ability to sleep. It may take longer, they may wake frequently, but eventually sleep comes. In fatal familial insomnia, something far more devastating happens. The brain gradually loses its ability to produce normal sleep at all. The disease is caused by a mutation in a protein known as a prion.
Unlike bacteria or viruses, prions contain no DNA, no RNA, just a misfolded protein capable of triggering other proteins to fold incorrectly as well. Over time, these abnormal proteins accumulate inside the brain. One region is affected more than almost any other, the thalamus. The thalamus acts as one of the brain's great communication hubs. Nearly everything you consciously experience passes through it: sight, sound, touch, movement. And perhaps most importantly, it plays a critical role in helping the brain transition into sleep. As the disease slowly damages this region, sleep becomes increasingly fragmented, then almost impossible. Eventually, it disappears almost entirely. At first, the symptoms can seem surprisingly ordinary: difficulty sleeping, anxiety, restlessness. But unlike common insomnia, they don't improve. Weeks become months. The brain grows progressively less capable of entering restorative sleep. Hallucinations appear. Memory declines. Blood pressure becomes unstable. Body temperature becomes difficult to regulate. The autonomic nervous system, the network responsible for countless automatic functions, begins losing its balance. Even sweating, heart rate, and breathing patterns can become abnormal. As the disease progresses, the distinction between day and night begins to disappear. Patients become profoundly exhausted, yet still they cannot truly sleep. Imagine feeling the overwhelming need for sleep every minute of every day, while your own brain has forgotten how to provide it. It is one of the cruelest neurological disorders ever identified. Researchers spent years asking a simple question: why does this disease become fatal? Is it the lack of sleep itself, or is it the widespread damage occurring throughout the brain? The answer is probably both. The disease destroys critical brain structures, but it also demonstrates something equally important. Sleep isn't optional. The brain cannot simply decide to function without it. Remove the ability to sleep, and eventually the entire system begins to collapse. Fortunately, fatal familial insomnia is extraordinarily rare. Only a tiny number of families around the world carry the mutation. Most people will never encounter it. Most physicians won't either. But its existence revealed something that scientists had suspected for decades. Sleep isn't something the brain does when it has nothing better to do. Sleep is one of the jobs, one of the most important jobs. Without it, the brain slowly loses its ability to maintain itself. Fortunately for the rest of us, our brains still know how to sleep. Every evening, the same remarkable process quietly begins again. The question is, why would evolution make something so vulnerable, so incredibly important? Why would every animal, from birds to whales to tiny insects, accept the enormous risk of becoming unconscious every single day? The answer may be the clearest evidence yet that sleep is not time lost, it's time invested. If sleep were only rest, evolution would have gotten rid of it long ago. Nature does not keep unnecessary processes. Anything that wastes energy, anything that reduces survival, anything that doesn't help reproduction eventually disappears. Yet sleep remains. Across almost every species studied, it has survived hundreds of millions of years. From insects to reptiles to birds to mammals, everything with a brain sleeps. Even animals that are constantly at risk of predation still enter states of sleep. That alone tells us something important. Sleep is not optional. It is fundamental. So what is sleep actually doing that is so essential?
The answer is not one single function, it is many, happening at the same time. Inside your brain, sleep is when information is reorganized, memories are strengthened, unnecessary connections are weakened, emotional experiences are processed and stored in a more stable form. The brain is not just turning off, it is actively restructuring itself, like a library being reorganized overnight so everything can be found again tomorrow. At the same time, a cleaning system becomes active. Fluid flows more efficiently through the brain's tissue, removing metabolic waste products that build up during wakefulness. By morning, the environment inside the brain is physically different than it was the night before. Cleaner, more balanced, more efficient.
Meanwhile, your body is undergoing its own restoration. Hormones support tissue repair. Muscles recover from daily strain. Cells replace damaged components. The immune system strengthens its response capacity. Hormones reset their daily rhythm. Blood pressure drops to give the cardiovascular system a break. Even metabolism adjusts itself for the next day. Nothing is idle. Everything is coordinated. And yet, despite all of this activity, you experience none of it consciously. There is no awareness of repair, no perception of cleaning, no memory of restoration. Sleep is one of the only biological states where the body performs essential survival maintenance while the mind is completely offline. This is why sleep deprivation is so dangerous. It does not break just one system. It slowly disrupts all of them at once. Cognition, emotion, memory, immunity, metabolism, cardiovascular stability. Everything begins to drift out of balance, not immediately, but progressively, quietly. And this is also why every attempt to ignore sleep eventually fails. You can delay it, you can resist it, you can override it temporarily with stress hormones, caffeine, or sheer willpower, but you cannot remove it. Because sleep is not something the brain chooses to do. It is something the brain requires in order to continue functioning at all. So when you return to that original question, what happens if you never sleep? The real answer is not a single dramatic event. It is a gradual unraveling, not of one system, but of all systems working together, until the brain can no longer maintain the illusion of wakefulness. And eventually, it takes control back, one way or another. Sleep always returns. And now, as we reach the end of this journey, you can let go of all of it. No more explanations, no more systems, no more science, just stillness. From here on, the narration slowly fades, and what remains is only a soft layer of sound, a low brown noise, steady, deep, like distant wind moving through an empty space, and a quiet, open atmosphere beneath it, giving your mind room to settle, without effort, without direction, without resistance. There is nothing you need to do now, nothing to solve, nothing to follow. Just allow everything to slow down on its own. You've stayed until the end, so thank you for being here. Now you can rest. Let the night take over, and let sleep come in its own time, naturally, quietly, and completely. Good night.
After this narration ends, there will be a short period of silence, followed by a gentle background sound. A soft brown noise will continue. Low, steady, unchanging. Not music, not something you need to follow. More like the distant sound of wind or a calm ocean that never quite reaches the shore. Its only purpose is to gently cover sudden noises from the outside world, so your mind doesn't stay alert when it doesn't need to. Along with it, there will be a subtle space ambiance. Wide, open, almost like the feeling of being far away from everything for a moment. Nothing about it is meant to pull your attention. It's simply there to help everything slow down, so your thoughts don't have to stay sharp anymore. You don't need to focus on anything now. You don't need to process anything. You don't need to try to sleep either. Just allow things to settle on their own. Thank you for staying until the end of this journey. Now put your phone aside, dim the light if you can, and give yourself permission to rest. Sleep will come in its own time. Good night.